It was the night before Thanksgiving, 1971. A man in a dark suit walked into Portland Airport, paid cash, gave a fake name, boarded the plane. He sat in seat 18C near the back of the plane. He was calm, polite, ordered a bourbon and soda, lit a cigarette, and waited. 30 minutes into the flight, he called the flight attendant over, handed her a folded note. She assumed it was a phone number from a lonely businessman. 30 minutes into the flight, he called the flight attendant over, handed her a folded note. She assumed it was a phone number from a lonely businessman. She opened the note. The handwriting was neat, almost businesslike. It outlined exactly what he wanted, and what would happen if he did not get it. He opened the briefcase, just enough for her to see inside. Wires, red cylinders, a battery. She had no way to know if it was real. It only needed to look real enough. And it did. The flight attendant walked straight to the cockpit. The pilot radioed Seattle Air Traffic Control immediately. The demand was precise: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, a fuel truck standing by in Seattle. No funny business. No law enforcement interference whatsoever. The plane circled Puget Sound for nearly 2 hours while the ground below went into full emergency response. Banks, FBI, airline executives, all moving simultaneously. Northwest Orient's president personally authorized the full ransom payment. No questions asked. $200,000 in $20 bills, pulled from Seattle area banks within hours. Before a single bill left that building, FBI agents photographed every note. 10,000 individual bills, every serial number captured on film. He did not know that. He requested 4 parachutes, deliberately. If they gave him only 1, it might be sabotaged. 4 meant they could not control which one he would use. The plane landed in Seattle after dark. He allowed all 36 passengers to leave the aircraft calmly. Then he kept the pilots and 1 flight attendant. He counted the money himself, methodically, bill by bill. Then he had the plane refueled and gave the pilots the strangest flight instructions anyone had ever heard. Fly low, under 10,000 feet. Keep the cabin unpressurized. Keep the landing gear down. Fly slow, 150 knots. Lower the rear stairs mid-flight. Only 1 aircraft in commercial aviation had rear stairs that could open during flight, the Boeing 727. He had known that before he ever bought the ticket. The plane took off into the dark storm. Below, dense forest, 0 visibility, rain, wind, and somewhere over southwest Washington at exactly 8:13 p.m., he jumped. The aircraft registered a sudden upward pitch and pressure change in the tail section. The crew went to investigate. The rear stairs were empty. He was already gone. When the plane landed safely in Reno, investigators boarded immediately. They found a darkened cabin, 2 unused parachutes, a clip-on tie, 8 cigarette butts, nothing else. A clip-on tie, 8 cigarette butts. That was the complete physical evidence left behind by the man who committed the only unsolved air hijacking in American history. The FBI launched what became the largest manhunt in American aviation history. Military aircraft, ground search teams, hundreds of agents. Weeks of searching dense Pacific Northwest forest. They found nothing. No body. No parachute caught in the trees. No equipment. No money. No trace of any kind across hundreds of square miles of wilderness. Investigators began asking a question nobody had an answer to. Could a man in a business suit and dress shoes survive that jump at night in a storm? Experienced skydivers consulted by the FBI described the terrain below as some of the most unforgiving wilderness on the West Coast. Survival without proper gear, nearly impossible. And yet, no body was ever found either. No remains in the forest. No grave. No death certificate under any name matching the case. Simply nothing. February 1980, 9 years after the hijacking. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging in sand along the Columbia River preparing a campfire with his family. He pulled a rotting bundle of cash from the sand. Investigators confirmed the serial numbers. $5,800 of D.B. Cooper's ransom, found on a riverbank. The location made no sense. Miles from the logical landing zone. The money should not have been there. Nobody has ever fully explained how it got to that riverbank. The rest of the money, $194,000, has never been found. Not one additional bill. Not anywhere. In over 50 years of searching, the FBI named the case NORJAK, Northwest Hijacking. At its peak, hundreds of agents were simultaneously assigned. More sustained effort than almost any investigation in Bureau history. Over 800 individuals were formally investigated across the following decades. Retired paratroopers, airline employees, men who confessed on their deathbeds. Not one was ever confirmed. Richard McCoy Jr. hijacked another Boeing 727 just 4 months later using a nearly identical method. He was caught within days. The FBI compared every detail, eventually ruled out. Kenneth Christensen, former paratrooper, Northwest Orient Airlines employee, was named by his own brother years after his death. Physical comparisons made, never conclusively confirmed as Cooper. Dwayne Weber told his wife on his deathbed, "I am Dan Cooper." Investigators exhumed records, compared fingerprints, reviewed his entire history. The evidence did not support the confession. Robert Rackstraw, former Army paratrooper with a documented criminal history, was publicly named by independent researchers in 2016. He denied involvement until his death, never charged. In 2009, scientists examined the clip-on tie under an electron microscope and found microscopic titanium particles, materials linked to aerospace manufacturing in the early 1970s. It was the only real forensic lead the entire case ever produced. And even that, a trace of metal on a tie, never led to a name. His real name was never Dan Cooper. He made that up. A reporter covering the story misheard it as D.B. Cooper. The wrong name stuck permanently in history. The town near the presumed drop zone still holds an annual festival in his name. There is a beer named after him. Multiple films, dozens of documentaries. No answers. He was never remembered with anger. The flight attendants said they did not hate him. The pilot said he was professional. Nobody on the plane called him a villain. In July 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially suspended the active investigation. Not solved, just stopped. Resources redirected. The file still marked open. The case still technically active. If he survived, he spent the rest of his life as someone else, watching news about himself, watching the FBI search for a man who was sitting right there. If he did not survive, his body decomposed somewhere in that forest. Dense enough terrain, large enough search area, a body could remain undiscovered there indefinitely. Either way, whether alive or dead, he took the answer with him. And 45 years of the most sophisticated law enforcement agency on Earth could not take it back. D.B. Cooper is not remembered as a villain in American culture. He is something stranger, a ghost, a folk anti-hero who beat the system and was never punished. The only unsolved air hijacking in American aviation history. The only hijacker who was never found, identified, or charged. The only case of its kind in the world. Whoever he was, whatever his real name was, wherever he landed that night, he remains the most successful and most anonymous criminal in the history of American aviation. The file is suspended, not closed. The FBI still says it would review credible new physical evidence if it ever surfaced. After 50 years, nothing credible has surfaced. Somewhere, in a forest, or at the bottom of a river, or sitting quietly in a house somewhere, is the answer to the only unsolved hijacking in history. That answer has stayed silent for over 50 years. The parachute is still missing. Most of the money is still missing. And so, is he? Florence Schaffner, the flight attendant who first received the note, said he was the calmest person she had ever encountered in any crisis situation. In her entire career, he knew the Boeing 727 specifically. He knew about the rear stairs. He knew the flight path. This was not improvisation. Every single step was planned in advance. He knew the Boeing 727 specifically. He knew about the rear stairs. He knew the flight path. This was not improvisation. Every single step was planned in advance. One of the parachutes he left behind, a civilian chute, was later found to have been sewn shut. It could not have opened. He had chosen correctly. Either he knew, or he was extraordinarily lucky. Both possibilities have haunted investigators for 50 years, because both say something deeply unsettling about how this happened. The FBI's own profilers struggled to build a consistent picture of him. He showed skills suggesting military or law enforcement background, yet nothing in any database ever matched. Thanksgiving Eve, 1971. While families across America prepared for the holiday, a man in a suit stepped off the rear of a passenger plane into a Pacific Northwest storm. He was calm throughout the entire ordeal, never raised his voice, never threatened anyone physically. Multiple crew members later used the same word to describe him: professional. The case number is still open. The reward was never claimed. The parachute was never found. The man was never identified. And the night before Thanksgiving remains unsolved. He jumped with $200,000. 9 years later, a child found 6,000 of it in a riverbank. The river kept the rest, and so did the silence. Subscribe to Midnight Archive. Every week, a new file. Cases investigated for decades. Cases where the official answer never fit the evidence. The archive never closes.